যদি সবাই ফিরে যায়, ওরে ওরে ও ভাগা সবাই ফিরে যায়, যদি গহন পথে যাওয়ার কালে কেউ ফিরে না চায়, তবে পথের কাটা তুই রক্ত মাখা চরণ তলে একলা দলরে, তুই রক্ত মাখা চরণ তলে একলা দলরে, যদি তোর ডাক শুনে কেউ না আসে, তবে একলা চলো রে। যদি আলো না ধরে, ওরে ওরে ও ভাগা আলো না ধরে, যদি ঝড় বাদলে আধার রাতে দুয়ার দেয় ঘরে, তবে বজ্রানলে আপন বুকের পাঁজর জ্বালিয়ে নিয়ে একলা জলরে, আপন বুকের পাঁজর জ্বালিয়ে নিয়ে একলা জলরে, যদি তোর ডাক শুনে কেউ না আসে, তবে একলা চলো রে। একলা চলো, একলা চলো, একলা চলো, একলা চলো রে।
Hi guys, thank you for joining the live stream. And today my mic is on before anybody has to remind me. Thank God. So guys, today I'm very excited to discuss this essay by someone I don't know who has written this. I just was sent this paper by someone we shall never know. It's an essay of sorts, okay? Wait. So this is the name of the paper. It's going to be a really fun discussion. We are basically going to discuss how Brahmin Marxists, with their incredible skill of pretending to be poor, have accumulated even more power by renouncing, okay, paisa kya hai, haath ki mail hai, etc. Those kinds of things, anti-chromatism, or even when our PM says, हम तो फकीर आदमी है, झोला लेके निकल पड़ेंगे. That obsession with being poor and somehow that signaling as if that's equal to virtue, okay? हम गरीब इंसान है तो बहुत बढ़िया कुछ उखाड़ लिया है जिंदगी में, ठीक है, हम गरीब है. Remember AIB or TVF's parody of Arvind Kejriwal becoming CM for the first time? Arvind Kejriwal's parody version talks to that sanskari Bollywood actor who's not really sanskari in his real life. He was accused of Me Too and stuff, but he always played the sanskari roles. So that character was saying to Arvind Kejriwal, and I think that was the very first ever recognition of this concept called asceticism, which is probably my second favorite concept to discuss in academia and social sciences. So that sanskari uncle guy says that thoda aur gareeb lagna hai Arvind, and then he does some other stuff, wears the muffler in a different way, and he says thoda aur gareeb Arvind, thoda aur gareeb, and he goes on saying it. So here to learn is saying keep this day in the cage of your আজ এই দিনটাকে মনের খাঁচায় তুলে রাখবো, কারণ আজ মাইক অন ছিল. হ্যালো অরিন্দম, হ্যালো ঋষভ, রাম রাম, yes live, hello Kaladin, hello Shekhar, hello Anand. Okay, so the paper is called Asceticism and the Domination of Brahmin Marxists. It's going to be a very, very fun discussion. Let's start then. Do you all need to see the paper? Okay, let's see. The following article is a historical deconstruction of Brahmin dominance in the state of West Bengal, India, that saw the only democratically elected Communist Party led government for 34 consecutive years. The predominance of ascetic values among Brahmin politicians of West Bengal, who have dictated its politics for the last 8 centuries, is a significant reason that the state is the most casteist state of India. Furthermore, we try to understand the role of asceticism across time and space in order to demonstrate its relation to power and privilege in different cultures of the world. This includes comparisons of ascetic movements among Christians, Buddhists, and Brahmins, which allowed their practitioners to acquire social and political domination for themselves. This exercise allows for us to understand how two seemingly contradictory ideologies of Brahmanism and Marxism came together to ensure that Brahmin Marxists dominate West Bengal's political and cultural spheres in post-colonial India. We have started with a banger. Abhishek Bhatto is saying, Har Har Mahadev, Jai Ma Bharti. Yes, Abhishek. Okay, let's start. This was the abstract. The most casteist state in India. In his treatise on Dalit leader Jogendranath Mondal, Doipayan Sen controversially labeled West Bengal as the most casteist state in India, a claim that has generated considerable debate and discussion from his work in 2018. This paper examines the unusual persistence of Brahmin domination in a state with a century-long history of social justice movements and socialist and Marxist ideologies. Considering the 21st century trend in most of India toward increased representation and dominance of Dalits and other backward classes, West Bengal presents a notable exception as its socio-political landscape remains largely under the control of upper castes. The continued domination of privileged castes, masked by revolutionary ideologies such as Marxism, might be attributable to another significant and previously unconsidered factor, however. Beginning in the early 20th century, the source of this domination can be traced to the powerful imagery of the Bengali upper caste gentleman, the Bhadralok, and his inexplicable connection between his Marxist beliefs, his unique value system, and his participation in revolutionary activism. Instead of focusing on political or religious ideologies as the key to understanding the Brahmins' enduring dominance, I will argue that this remarkable and persistent phenomenon is primarily rooted in the power of asceticism, a factor that has consistently benefited elites throughout history and across different regions. A closer look at asceticism and its impact across cultures is needed to understand how Brahmin Marxists used this long-standing value system to connect with their followers. Did I miss any footnotes? No, I didn't. Asceticism, power, and exclusion. The common perception of asceticism typically involves monks and spiritual leaders, portraying them as individuals who live simple lives characterized by minimal consumption and rejection of luxuries. However, Valantasis defines asceticism as performances within a dominant social environment intended to inaugurate a new subjectivity, different social relations, and an alternate symbolic universe. Let's check out the footnotes. Dalits are formerly untouchable castes who have been historically the consistently low political representation of Dalits in West Bengal, coupled with the notable absence of caste as a political issue, raises significant questions about the deliberate silencing of lower castes by upper caste actors within the state's political landscape. From 1952 to 2001, an overwhelming majority, 49.1% of upper caste MLAs in West Bengal were Brahmins, a group that, along with Kayasthas and Vaidyas, comprised between 37.5% and 50% of all MLAs, despite representing only approximately 10% of the state's population. In colonial Bengal during the 20th century, the Bhadralok revolutionaries were significantly impacted by the influential imagery of warrior monks and ascetics, a factor that caused them to reshape their identities. Now, building upon his earlier arguments, he stresses Valantasis. Valantasis stresses the theatrical nature of ascetic existence, suggesting that the self-discipline and the rejection of common human impulses practiced by ascetics are deliberately staged and presented in an idealized manner within the public realm, thus creating a highly developed and complex genre of performance. Think of Mamata Banerjee's hunger strike for the Shingur Tata factory. Complex genre of performance. The impact that ascetics have on broader society is noteworthy because their ascetic performances are not only practices but also goal-oriented actions that shape their influence. The relentless pursuit of their goals, even at great personal sacrifice, makes asceticism a powerful force capable of influencing society's dominant structures through tactical opposition and the proposed construction of a relationally opposite structure. Consequently, asceticism should not be seen as a rejection of power, but rather as an active, performative pursuit of power that purposefully distinguishes itself from and resists the lifestyles of both the common people and the power elite. Given the universal appeal of asceticism, further analysis is warranted in our exploration of the symbiosis between seemingly opposing ideologies, namely Marxism and Brahminism, and their surprising commonalities. If we are to achieve a theoretical reconciliation of Marxism within the lived realities of its Brahmin practitioners in South Asia, a critical task lies in identifying and emphasizing a fundamental element common to both ideologies, thereby enriching our overall understanding. The following sections will provide a detailed examination of the various forms of asceticism practiced across different cultures and time periods, thereby illuminating the complex relationship between asceticism and power. We begin with our exploration of asceticism and power with the case of Christian monasticism in medieval Europe. Let me have some coffee and check some comments now. Rishabh is saying, I can already predict what a leftist would say to this. That Brahmins use asceticism as a tool of power. Modi and Yogi are ascetics. Hence, proof BJP is a Brahmin party. Yes. Devojit, this is a paper called Asceticism and the Domination of Brahmin Marxists. Okay, asceticism and Christianity. In the 3rd century, Christian asceticism was formalized into the monastic culture. However, its foundations were much more ancient, stemming from common practices observed within the Hellenistic society of the early centuries CE. In 3rd century Egypt, the coexistence of traditional religious cults with those of Greek and Roman origin was ultimately destabilized by a period of intense economic crisis, which resulted in the displacement of numerous peasants from the land they worked. As a heterodox sect, without any standardized practices, Christianity nonetheless spread in the region. Its appeal strongest among the upper classes. René Girard ko yaad karo. As the church grew in power and prosperity by the early 4th century, or also think of Nietzsche in a way, although Nietzsche criticized Christianity for promoting slave morality. As the church grew in power and prosperity by the early 4th century, becoming heavily involved in trade and land cultivation, it established a system of governance where powerful bishops were appointed, often from the ranks of monks, to effectively manage its extensive operations. The inhabitants of these offices usually stemmed from backgrounds of significant inherited wealth and privilege, having opted for a life of removed from worldly matters. Okay, opted for a life removed from worldly matters. ऐसा नहीं है कि पैदाइश जन्म से गरीब था. Hailing from a wealthy family, Saint Anthony, from 251 to 356 CE, became a pivotal figure in establishing Christian monasticism, transforming spiritual practice for centuries to come. In Saint Anthony's view, asceticism was a natural state for most men, a perspective shared by his followers, and this understanding established asceticism as an essential condition for achieving virtuous life. Monasticism, with its pursuit of asceticism, ultimately aimed at creating a unique social order separate from the mundane aspects of everyday life, which manifested itself in the form of a polis or city. Unburdened by societal responsibilities and largely self-sufficient in terms of physical needs, the monastic orders emerging from Egypt and Palestine, composed of holy men, achieved a degree of freedom and autonomy that significantly and undeniably impacted the spread of Christianity. The westward movement of ascetics, including prominent figures like John Cassian, 360 to 435 CE, movement into Western Europe significantly contributed to the expansion of monasticism throughout the region, primarily through the founding of numerous monasteries across Gaul. Extending its influence throughout Western Europe by the 5th century, monasticism became firmly entrenched, significantly shaped by the contributions of key figures such as Caesarius of Arles, 472 to 542 CE, and Saint Benedict, 480 to 547 CE, who not only revitalized existing monastic communities but also established crucial regulations that guided the monastic orders of that era. In the centuries that followed, Benedict's established guidelines, adapted from Eastern monastic practices to suit the Western world, became the standard operating procedure for monastic communities. The Life of Saint Benedict, a biographical composition created by Pope Gregory the Great in 593 CE, was important in the process of making Saint Benedict a well-known and celebrated figure among the people. by advocating for collective property ownership under a democratically elected abbot and simultaneously negating personal ownership. Okay, listen to this. Advocating for collective property ownership under a democratically elected abbot and simultaneously negating personal ownership, the rules offered a compelling means of streamlining the operational effectiveness within the monasteries. Although monastic orders were theoretically open to men of all social classes, most monks came from aristocratic backgrounds. Where have we heard similar things before? Doesn't this sound very familiar? Specifically, the aristocratic family's tradition of child oblation, a practice involving the donation of their child, guaranteed a continuous supply of ascetics from the highest echelons of society, a phenomenon that persisted until the 12th century. English double monasteries that housed nuns and monks enjoyed tremendous power and influence in the monastic communities and among lay persons in society. Beginning in the 7th and 8th centuries, English monks played a pivotal role in disseminating the principles of Benedictine monasticism and expanding the reach of the church throughout Western Europe, which ultimately resulted in the establishment of a cohesive and unified monastic tradition across the region. The practice of many rulers bestowing land upon monasteries. Here comes the game changer. The practice of many rulers bestowing land upon monasteries in Western Europe stemmed from a desire to secure divine favor and intercession, as well as to provide care for the surplus children of aristocratic families, ultimately resulting in the monasteries' significant accumulation of land and power. Doesn't it sound very, very familiar? Even in medieval India, ancient India. Listen to this sentence. Beginning in the 7th and 8th centuries, English monks played a pivotal role in disseminating the principles of Benedictine monasticism and expanding the reach of the church throughout Western Europe, which ultimately resulted in the establishment of a cohesive, unified monastic tradition. Okay, but the practice of many rulers bestowing land upon monasteries in Western Europe stemmed from a desire to secure divine favor and intercession, as well as to provide care for the surplus children of aristocratic families, ultimately resulting in the monastery's significant accumulation of land and power. It's all the same everywhere. Western European monasteries had evolved by the 12th century into formidable institutions owning extensive lands, acting as landlords, and actively participating in business ventures designed to generate profit. So you see, European monasteries were doing business for profit. The practice of kings granting monasteries vast landholdings and resources was common, motivated by a desire to secure administrative and military assistance and to exert influence over appointments within the monastic orders. So you see, it's all basically the same what happened in India and West Bengal. During the 12th century, the burgeoning Cistercian or Shian movement spearheaded a significant revitalization of the then existing monastic orders, establishing themselves as reformers in direct opposition to the prevailing Cluniac and Benedictine orders. The pioneering efforts of Bernard of Clairvaux, 1090 to 1153 CE, were directed against the Cluniacs, and his actions ultimately served to highlight the preeminence of the Cistercian order. The Cistercians, enjoying the support of influential patrons including David I of Scotland and Henry I of England, were consequently able to strategically position their monasteries throughout Europe, leading to a widespread network of religious houses. Because of their strong relationship with the papacy, particularly under Pope Innocent III, they were able to strengthen their position in the region through their involvement in the conversion of pagans, the suppression of heresy, and even participation in the Crusades. Consequently, Their members were often appointed to high ranking positions within the church, such as bishops, and on one occasion, even the papacy. Through their interactions and engagement with the wider world, the Cistercian order achieved remarkable succession during the medieval period in Western Europe, evidenced by substantial patronage and a considerable lay following, so ordinary people's following. Although the Franciscan and Dominican orders' rise in the 13th century Western Europe was associated with asceticism, a discriminatory undercurrent emerged, manifesting as a spread of anti-Semitic beliefs and actions among the populace. Drawn largely from urban populations, these monks disseminated hateful rhetoric targeting Jews, advocating for their expulsion from society, a campaign particularly fueled by the papal authority of Innocent III. Prevented from owning land in late medieval Europe, Jewish people consequently became prominent moneylenders, a fact that the Franciscan order, characterized by its rigorous asceticism, exploited to cultivate anti-Jewish sentiment through public propaganda that demonized Jewish financial practices and linked them to Satan. They were prevented from owning land, so they became moneylenders. The austere lifestyles embraced by monks, combined with their extensive religious influence within society, resulted in their anti-Semitic propaganda proving unexpectedly effective. Thus, hereditary privileges, associations with offices of power, and discrimination, all of these were associated with Christian asceticism. Next, we move on to Buddhist asceticism in ancient and early medieval South Asia. So you see, it's a beautiful comparative analysis. Asceticism and Buddhism. Let me wipe my glasses a little. मेरा चश्मा का थोड़ा asceticism हो गया. Ascetic chashma. Johannes Bronkhorst has noted that Buddhism began as a group of mendicants from the greater Magadha area. The region in the eastern part of the Indian subcontinent was largely shaped by dominant cultural and religious ideologies which were founded on and revolved around the principles of rebirth and the effects of karma. Building upon the foundation of Jainism, the most ascetic religion of its era, Buddhist ideology significantly incorporated the concepts of karmic retribution and rebirth, reflecting the consequences of one's actions in past and future lives. Eventually, in the late centuries BCE, we see that the Sangha, or group of Buddhist mendicants, have settled in monasteries. State support formed the foundation of their early efforts, but this was later augmented by lay patronage, meaning patronage from common people, encompassing land grants and a variety of other resources. In urban centers that flourished during the mid first millennium BCE, an increasing number of Buddhist monks hailed from noble and elite families. Their embrace of asceticism was particularly significant because it was seen as an exclusive, highly desirable lifestyle that many others sought to emulate. Uma Chakraborty emphasizes the substantial participation of Khattiyas or Kshatriyas, a warrior caste within the early Sangha, the foundational Buddhist monastic order. The majority of ascetics actually originated from the most privileged echelons of society during this time, a phenomenon that can be attributed to the political instability of that era. Despite this, it is clear that these intricate belief systems appealed more to those from the upper echelons of society rather than to those from the lower orders. Because see the similarity across ideologies. Because Buddhist leaders were unwilling to create significant societal upheaval. Okay, Buddhist leaders were unwilling to create significant societal upheaval. Those slaves who had not achieved manumission were explicitly prohibited from joining the Sangha. Let me tell you all the exact meaning of manumission. Release from slavery. The doctrine of karma, rather than fostering unity between social strata, ironically created an aspirational model for lower castes, suggesting that accumulation of positive karmas could lead to elevation in their next lives, thereby reinforcing rather than bridging the existing gap. Furthermore, Ghosh's account sheds light on the system of employing aramikas, or monastery servants to cater to the monks' personal needs, providing valuable insight into the daily life and social dynamics within the monastery. Nevertheless, employing a gentler term might have been a deliberate attempt to obscure the genuinely exploitative dynamics between the monks and their attendants, thereby highlighting a level of exploitation inherent in Buddhist monastic life. Holy cow. Very important section. Buddhist leaders were unwilling to create significant societal upheaval. The slaves had not achieved freedom from slavery. They were explicitly prohibited from joining the Sangha. And the doctrine of karma, rather than fostering unity between social strata, ironically created an aspirational model for lower castes, suggesting that the accumulation of positive karmas could lead to elevation in their next lives, thereby reinforcing the existing gap. The persistence of monastic landlordism within the Sangha resulted in a system where ascetics organized within state-funded monasteries effectively domesticated the Sangha, thereby exerting significant influence over the lives of common people in the surrounding communities. A complex three-way symbiotic relationship existed between the monasteries and the common people residing in the surrounding areas, a relationship marked by mutual benefit and interdependence. Three-way symbiotic relationship. Monasteries, common people, and who else? Existed between the monasteries and the lay people residing in the surrounding areas. A relationship. Okay. The governance and development of agrarian land donated by common and royal patrons often involved monks who in turn held sway over the peasants working that land, frequently sharing the resulting harvests with the monasteries and the original donors. In the early medieval period, 600 to 1300 CE, it was quite common for both royalty and laity to patronize Buddhist monasteries, a practice undertaken to gain spiritual merit and enhance their public image. The findings of Bailey and Mabet indicate a substantial political and social impact of early Buddhism on the common people around monasteries. Buddhist monks, reliant on common people for support, fostered reciprocal relationships that integrated them into common people's society, even with their renunciate lifestyles and ascetic practices. Their involvement in resolving disputes and fostering cultural integration in newly expanding regions under the developing states of the time was, in actuality, a direct consequence of their ascetic and rigorously disciplined lifestyles. Consequently, Buddhist monks, far from isolating themselves from the world and its inhabitants, significantly impacted society and earned considerable prestige and power by embracing an ascetic way of life. The popular notion of Buddhist monks renouncing material wealth and power is refuted by Chopin, who presents compelling evidence indicating that those monks possessed substantial material holdings and employed a diverse range of financial mechanisms, including but not limited to loan contracts, perpetuities, the operation of old age homes, and engagement in various manufacturing enterprises. ठीक है, देखो, गरीबी का दिखावा किया टॉप सॉइल पे, सुपरफिशियल लेवल पे, अंदर अंदर पूरा अपना गेम खेल दिए. The problem with the Buddhist lifestyle is that the concepts of reincarnation and rebirth were used to rationalize the social hierarchy, creating a system where birth determined status. The justification and institutionalization of caste hierarchies in Buddhist texts stemmed from the attribution of individuals' lower social standing to their karma accumulated in past lives, a concept that reinforced societal inequalities. The prevailing understanding was that bodhisattvas were born almost exclusively into the higher Kshatriya and Brahmin families, a stark contrast to those from the Shudra caste and the outcasts. Births into lower castes were viewed as having a karmic function, acting as a vessel for the punishment or purification of sinners in their present lives. The preservation of blood purity and ancestral lineage is governed by a diverse range of prescriptions, all of which underscore the inherent and unalterable nature of one's caste within the context of their present existence. Buddhist texts eulogized the dominant castes, known as kulinas, or those from the superior clans, the kulas, while simultaneously repudiating lower castes and criticizing Brahmins for their laxity in marital unions with women from other castes. This we discussed in one of the first research papers we ever discussed from this channel. We had called that live stream Casteism in Buddhism. Right after Abhas Malda here pointed those things out in Kushal Mehra's podcast, that there are quotes in some texts quoting the Buddha himself, saying that who got angry with Brahmins for marrying outside their caste, and saying that even dogs understand castes better than you because dogs have sex with only other dogs, while Brahmins don't always have mate with just Brahmins. Consequently, the texts reveal a systematic pattern of discrimination against hunting tribes, lower castes, and other groups whose livelihoods depend on hunting, fishing, and other activities that were deemed violent, thus institutionalizing such prejudice within the societies described. This we had learnt of in Irfan Habib's paper as well, that we see in some points in history where farmers or these, let's say, people, especially farmers at least, were considered Vaishyas at one point, because they are, after all, people who are running a business. After the popularity of Buddhism increases, all of a sudden they become Shudras, including, of course, people who hunt and fish, because they are killing animals, knowingly or unknowingly. In ancient South Asia, the institutionalization of caste discrimination was significantly influenced by Buddhist texts, which, through the promotion of ahimsa or non-violence and the karmic theory that rationalizes lower social status for specific castes, provided substantial justifications for the discrimination against animal killing castes. Habib 1983 as well, I see. Yeah, I guess we were reading the 1997 paper where Habib cited himself from 1983. Vivekanand Jha suggests that the prejudice against leather workers and charioteers evident in Buddhist writings is a consequence of their association with death and conflict. This linkage ultimately led to a diminished social status for these professions, placing them in the same category as trades such as those of artisans and barbers. Power, hereditary privilege, and discrimination, all these factors were associated with Buddhist asceticism as well, basically. Caste discrimination, in fact, yielded its ideological foundation from Buddhist philosophy, as per Irfan Habib. Quote from Irfan Habib: "It would therefore be wrong to suppose that the caste ideology has been exclusively Brahminical in its development. The period from the rise of Buddhism, circa 500 BC, to the Gupta age, 4th and 5th centuries AD, may then be supposed to be the period of the formation of the Indian caste system and its supporting ideology." When Buddhism arrives. Next, we will analyze the development of Brahmin asceticism in South Asia. This is going to be fun. Har Har Mahadev Shayok, Jai Bharavnath, Durge Durge, Trahimam Durge. Buddhists were the earliest. Which book is this? Buddhadev, this is not a book, this is an essay by someone we don't know. Asceticism and the domination of Brahmin Marxists. This is the topic. Okay. So we are doing a comparative analysis between Brahmin Marxists, Christian monks, Christian ascetics, Buddhist ascetics, and Brahmin ascetics, and how in all these four groups of people, it was the dikhava of garibi, the renunciation, the asceticism, that in fact helped them accumulate even more power. How the Brahmins won. It's the name of a famous book. Brahmin asceticism is an atypical development in the history of South Asia. Historically, the Brahmin community located in the northwestern region of South Asia comprised a hereditary group of priests and intellectuals who played a crucial role in society. Due to a division in the roles of the consecrated warrior within Vedic society, circa 1700 to 600 BCE, a distinct group of individuals known as Brahmins arose as hereditary ritual specialists. the invasion of Alexander the Great in 326 BCE, and the later formation of the Mauryan Empire 322 to 185 BCE caused the Brahmins to move eastward, leading to their establishment in the eastern parts of the Indian subcontinent. While Vedic religion did not initially incorporate the concepts of karma and rebirth, the Mauryan Empire's patronage of Buddhism led to the gradual adoption of various Buddhist practices by the Vedic religion, as Buddhism's growing power influenced Vedic religious beliefs and customs. Through a slow process of assimilation, the Brahmins in South Asia incorporated various elements of Buddhist lifestyles and practices and economic endeavors, resulting in their rise to power within the region. In contrast to their initial non-ascetic traditions, Brahmins in the post-Mauryan period strategically embraced ascetic practices mirroring those of Buddhists to bolster their position and gain wider societal acceptance, a transformation that is elucidated in Bronkhorst's book How the Brahmins Won from 2016. And you see, the problem with today's Sanatan economists is that they will consider all of this to be completely Hindu ways of running a society, whereas they are just a simple aberration in the form of Buddhism. In the period preceding the mid-first millennium BCE, Brahmins as a group of householders dedicated themselves to the performance of sacrificial rituals and the fulfillment of their multifaceted obligations to their families and society. Brahmin religious life was tied to continuation of the lineage and upholding the social and cosmic order. The ascendance of ascetic Buddhist and Jain orders within the expansive Magadha region significantly impacted and shaped the political landscape and socio-economic fabric of South Asia during the historical period. In terms of lifestyle, these groups differed fundamentally from the Brahmins because they rejected conventional social roles and instead embraced lives marked by mendicancy and celibacy. The Vedic ideology championed by the Brahmin caste faced significant challenges from emerging belief systems that placed a strong emphasis on the principles of karma and rebirth. The reign of Emperor Ashoka, 268 to 232 BCE, witnessed a significant shift in religious patronage, with Buddhist monasteries flourishing under his support while Brahminical sacrificial rituals suffered from the state's efforts to besmirch them. A major development resulted from the increasing acceptance and practice of ahimsa, the principle of non-violence, causing a substantial reduction in the occurrence of animal sacrifices. In response to these developments, Brahmins were compelled to adapt and develop their own understanding of asceticism and non-violence, ensuring that this new interpretation did not compromise or displace their most fundamental principles. This subsequently resulted in the Brahmin scholars developing the ashrama system, a system that prioritized both the lifestyle of a celibate, wandering ascetic and that of a householder, thereby establishing a new form of dharma or community norms within the prevailing Brahminical socio-political discussions. Although other lifestyles were acknowledged, the primacy and superiority were consistently assigned to the Grihastha ashrama, the life of a married householder in most Brahminical texts. Although some conservative Brahmin groups initially rejected the four traditional ashramas, Brahmacharya, celibate student life, Grihastha, married householder, Vanaprastha, retired householder, and Sannyasa, renunciation, in favor of a single ashrama, namely Grihastha, a reconciliation eventually occurred, demonstrating a shift in perspective and acceptance of the novel lifestyles of ascetics. So the trads of those days actually rejected the four ashramas. They said, let's keep only Grihastha, demonstrating a shift in perspective and acceptance of the novel lifestyles of ascetics. This arrangement enabled the Brahmins to maintain their established authority and influence within both religious and social spheres, successfully preventing other ascetic orders from gaining prominence. Because the ashrama system was established with an emphasis on the Grihastha ashrama in Brahmin discussions, the idea of social status was created. Because the ashrama system was established with an emphasis on the Grihastha ashrama in Brahmin discussions, the idea of social status was created, leading to the concept of the Dvija, or twice-born individual, which emerged near the end of the 2nd century BCE. The consequence of this was the rise to dominance of the Brahmin, Kshatriya, and Vaishya Varnas, or classes, each of whom were granted the right to wear the sacred thread participating in a significant rite of passage that marked their symbolic rebirth and elevated social status. The texts that introduced these concepts were categorized as Dharma Shastras. These texts contained discussions on the proper behavior expected of individuals within society, ranging from royalty to commoners, and simultaneously established the unique status of the Brahmin caste. Beginning with the Ashokan era, the notion of dharma became firmly rooted in sociopolitical dialogue, with its propagation being officially endorsed and actively promoted by the state and the Buddhist Sangha alike. The Brahmins ultimately adopted and reshaped the term to serve their own interests, drawing upon Vedic texts to bolster their claims and construct what they presented as exemplary standards of behavior for the different social classes of the period. The Dharmashastras contained detailed discussions of legal theory, the proper conduct of rulers, the art of government, and the practice of governance, and despite their seemingly unchanging structure, these texts actively engaged with and responded to the social upheavals of their time. So they were always changing more or less. Concurrently, throughout this period, Brahmin society saw a rise in the domestication of ascetic practices, as evidenced by the growing number of texts that detailed the pursuit of asceticism within the confines of the home. Dating back to the late 11th century, the Yati Dharma Samuchaya, the collection of ascetic laws authored by Yadava Prakasha, meticulously outlines and explains the numerous regulations and prescribed behaviors that Brahmins were expected to adhere to in their ascetic practices, which is kind of the mainstay of Manusmriti, which is practically impossible for any Brahmin to follow these days, or it was pretty impossible to follow forever. The text is Nibandha, a type of essay covering topics such as laws, inheritance, and religious practices. Excuse me. This particular Nibandha presents a significant advancement in the integration of ascetic ideals into the lives of householders, marking a notable development in the adoption of ascetic standards. Yadava, referencing a range of Smritis and Vedic texts to support his position in debates with contemporary Brahminical scholars, argued that only the Dharmashastras held ultimate authority on the question of whether asceticism was a valid component of the lifestyle of Brahmin householders. Citing earlier Dharmashastra authors such as Apastambha, Gautama, and Vasishtha, whose works were mostly composed before the 4th century CE, Yadava mounted a defense of the original concept of ashramas, which posited that a young adult had the freedom to choose any of the 4 ashramas as a path to pursue. By continuing to exemplify and uphold the archetype of the householder ascetic, Yadava effectively demonstrated a significant shift within the Vaishnava religious tradition. The radical renouncer, once viewed as an outsider, became a fully integrated member of the domestic sphere, eventually culminating in the complete assimilation of the ascetic into the exalted figure of the Brahmin householder. A significant portion of the text focuses on the Brahmin householder's concern with maintaining purity, specifically addressing the avoidance of dirt, excrement, and other pollutants that could potentially cause issues within their homes. The emphasis on cleanliness and purity was therefore a dramatic contrast to the free-spirited ways of life traditionally linked to asceticism and renunciation. Usually, when you practice asceticism and renunciation, your life kind of becomes a little freer. But instead, here were more rules to how to be perfectly ascetic. The protection of bodily orifices was considered of paramount importance by Brahmins, as this was seen as crucial for maintaining internal bodily purity, an idea that they extended to encompass their homes and nearby areas. In an attempt to showcase the potency of their spiritual and ascetic practices, Brahmin intellectuals authored a range of influential literary works encompassing the Sanskrit epics, the Ramayana and Mahabharata, 2nd century CE, the Dharmashastras, 300 BCE to 300 CE, the Arthashastra, 100 BCE to 100 CE, and the Manav Dharma Shastra, 3rd to 5th century CE, among other significant texts. The propaganda spread by these intellectuals effectively shaped popular opinion, leading to a widespread belief that kings and administrators could gain power and worldly success through the donation of land to Brahmins. and the establishment of tax-free villages known as agraharas. Due to these land grants, the Brahmin caste in early medieval South Asia, 600 to 1200 CE, accumulated significant power, thereby transforming into a powerful and influential corporate entity. Because they received tax-free land grants, they gained significant influence within society, frequently assuming positions of authority and power within the state's organizational structures as advisors to royalty, ministers, administrators, and intellectuals. Doesn't this sound familiar as well? The reason for this was the Brahmins' effective self promotion, leveraging their textual discourse to establish themselves as the best candidates for these influential roles. See how 100% similar this is to today's academics and what they do, and their tenure and stuff as an equivalent for the land grants back then. Of course, there are flats given to the tenured academics anyway. Through the strategic use of their positions as practitioners of ascetic values and statecraft, that we are not involved in politics, we are just academics. The Brahmins were able to solidify their powerful and dominant role in South Asian society. The land grants acquired by Brahmin communities also presented a stark contrast to those received by Buddhist monasteries. This difference is largely right. The land grants acquired by Brahmin communities also presented a stark contrast to those received by Buddhist monasteries. This difference is largely attributable to the Brahmins' non-celibate status. Because their descendants often inherited the lands their ancestors had received, the emerging states of the early medieval period institutionalized their caste status. Through the strategic adoption of a partially ascetic lifestyle, the Brahmin caste rose to become a landed feudal class during this period, thus gaining the privileges previously associated with Buddhists and surpassing them in power and influence. In that respect, nice. Partially ascetic lifestyle, genius. Kind of like today's commies. The Brahmin caste rose to become a landed feudal class during this period, thus gaining the privileges previously associated with Buddhists and surpassing them in power and influence. In that respect, their structures and power dynamics were not essentially dissimilar to those of European or Japanese feudal lords. It is undeniable, however, that the Brahminical law books played a significant role in establishing and perpetuating the discriminatory practices of exclusion and untouchability, thereby creating a deeply entrenched social hierarchy that marginalized a substantial portion of the population. Utilizing a wide array of sources from early and medieval periods of South Asian history, scholar Michael Actor's work showcases how concepts of adhikara, the authority or right to act within specific spaces such as the body, the home, or the village, were demonstrably threatened by the prevalent belief systems connecting pollution to particular groups of people, namely those persistently considered polluted, for example, members of the Chandala caste, and those temporarily subject to pollution, for example, menstruating women or those in mourning. Because of this, various rules were prescribed to avoid contact with specific individuals and to purify oneself if contact did occur, which eventually resulted in the creation of laws that controlled interactions with laborers who performed essential but menial tasks within society. Thus, the adoption of ascetic lifestyles by Brahmins led to their acquisition of power, pursue hereditary privileges, and practice discrimination. We now consider the case of Brahmin Marxists and how they came to dominate in the state of West Bengal. Lighter is asking, do you think this is true, Niranjan, that Vedic religion took rebirth and karma from Buddhism? Yes. Which is why Hindus never really, I think, internalized transmigration or Punarjanam fully, because Buddhists are mostly vegetarians, Jains, of course, vegetarians, because they truly believe in transmigration and rebirth. Hindus don't, which is why a lot of them eat meat. How can you behead an animal, or let's say in today's context, how can you forcibly impregnate a cow and take its dairy? Basically, rape the cow, prevent the calves from drinking the milk of the mother cow, keeping it in a cage from birth to death for about 4 years, whereas an ideal life cycle of a cow should be about 20 years, and impregnate them with by simply inserting the hands into the vagina of the cow or inserting bull semen with rods and stuff. If you believe in punarjanam, how can that happen? How do you know that cow or that goat you are killing, that hen who you just took home hanging upside down on your bicycle, is not your grandmother? How can you believe in punarjanam and eat meat at the same time? So you see, it was kind of imposed upon Hindus, the vegetarianism as well as rebirth concepts, which Hindus never really took really seriously. How the Brahmins kept winning. It would be inaccurate and reductive to characterize Marxism solely as an atheistic ideology diametrically opposed to all religious belief systems, as it has, in fact, demonstrably shared certain key similarities with the core tenets of Christianity. Alasdair MacIntyre's scholarship has illuminated the surprising commonality between seemingly disparate ideologies, Marxism and Christianity, by revealing their shared nature as forms of praxis, demonstrating how they both integrate moral convictions with practical engagement in the world. Marx, using his theory of historical materialism, took Hegel's ideas of fall and redemption, which stemmed from Christian theology, of course, and gave them a solid material form. In his work, MacIntyre highlights Marxism's revival of a communal ethic lost within liberal individualism, thereby reintroducing a Christian-inspired notion of a redeemed community. This, in turn, positions Marxist thought as a bridging theory, connecting theological concepts to a secularized society. My God, what a genius sentence and statement. Lighter, yes, practice and texts are different. That's only in the modern times. But it didn't take modern times and liberalism and wokeism to arrive for the Hindus to start eating animals. Yes, practicing and texts are different, which is why I don't see any relevance in people pointing out that that quote from Gita saying that no, casteism had nothing to do with birth ever because it said so in that one line in Gita. No, that's not how it happens. Why would that mean Hinduism is false? Entire Hinduism is predicated just on rebirth or what? And people who are serious Buddhists, let's say devout Buddhists, all of them, devout Jains and stuff, all of them are vegetarians to the T. But even devout Hindus, a lot of Brahmins, have no problem eating meat. That's because they have never really internalized the idea of rebirth. Yeah, Manoj Majumdar, there's no guarantee that they are in fact pre-Buddhist. Lighter is asking, so what happens after death according to Hinduism? Now to rebirth only, but no one cares. At one point, they did not really, I guess, bother about that. There is actually, sir. Okay. Say which text has those rebirth discussions, and which year they were written in, and which historians have, let's say, corroborated that they were in fact pre-Buddhist. So these Brahmins are atheists, Brahmins are by gunas. यार बाबा गुना फुना से ब्राह्मण हम क्लेम कर रहे हैं. Usually it's not happened. Okay, so you can't mix up today's reality with some heterodox and some texts. You're jumbling everything up. Yeah, Brihadaranyaka Upanishad. Which year was it written? And how many people agree that that's the year it was written? And how do you know exact those paragraphs of rebirth were not added later on? Was it a fossilized text? No, Buddhists believing in reincarnation is the main problem here. The revolutionary potential of both Christianity and Marxism, as highlighted by McIntyre, lay in their shared commitment to securing justice for those who had been oppressed and their shared desire to fundamentally restructure and to overthrow the existing power hierarchies within the social order. Both belief systems acknowledged the material world's contribution to human suffering and highlighted humanity's capacity to change it. Both belief systems propose liberation through transformative human action, essentially mirroring one another. Ultimately, the discipline and self-sacrifice demanded by asceticism proved unexpectedly pivotal in the establishment of modern political revolutions and similarly in the widespread adoption of Christianity in Europe. So you see, in that sense, therefore, Brahmins doing animal sacrifices even becomes more of a sacrifice because for someone who believes now in rebirth, for him the sacrifice is even more because that might be in fact his grandmother who returned to earth as a goat and is now being chopped off to as an offering to Makali. Whereas that was just a justification because they wanted to do animal sacrifices anyway, but now it's more of a sacrifice because rebirth. How can you recommend a random YouTube channel to discuss specific facts of history? Show me. If you learn from Sanatan Samiksha, tell me, answer my questions. Yeah, Shayok, tell me the timeline because the timelines we discussed here were also pretty ancient. It's not like that's not from 1500 BC, right? Where were we? Political revolutions in the West. Ultimately, the discipline and self-sacrifice demanded by asceticism proved unexpectedly pivotal in the establishment of modern political revolutions and similarly in the widespread adoption of Christianity in Europe. Modern Marxist revolutionaries in various parts of the globe repurposed asceticism, changing its traditional connotation of monastic devotion into a demonstrably militant public engagement with the masses, thus turning it into a potent weapon in their arsenal. Max Weber illustrated how a form of worldly asceticism stemming from Puritan work ethic and monastic discipline ultimately influenced political revolutions in the West. Through rigorous self discipline, the complete rejection of luxury, and a singular devotion to their cause, the revolutionary ascetic established an unassailable dominance within the public sphere. Lenin and Mao are notable examples of professional revolutionaries whose unwavering commitment to their revolutionary ideals bore a striking resemblance to a monk's dedication to religious values. However, this intense devotion was directed not towards spiritual goals but instead toward the complete upheaval and restructuring of existing power hierarchies. Because their followers saw them as charismatic and admired their masochistic self denial, they rallied around them. This in turn galvanized communist movements, making them effective challengers to dominant power structures. Much as Puritanism was key to the expansion of capitalism, the dedication and selflessness of communist activists were vital to the growth of 20th century radical communist movements. Max Weber's concept of charismatic leadership and the popular archetype of the ascetic revolutionary in modern politics share significant similarities. Think of Charu Majumdar. From the 12th century's Sena Empire to the post-colonial 20th century, the ascendancy of Brahmins in Bengal represented a persistent societal phenomenon, a dominance that spanned centuries, including the British colonial era in the 19th century. Between the 8th and 14th centuries, Bengal developed a unique cultural, literary, and linguistic identity, strengthened by the growing influence of Brahmanism. This gave rise to various caste groups that had specialized in literary activities and bureaucratic authority along with other professions. The British Raj, established in 1757 by the British East India Company, led to the gradual rise of a status group known as the Bhadralok in the 19th century. Predominantly, this status group consisted of members drawn from the three most influential landed and bureaucratic castes in pre-modern Bengal, the Brahmin caste and the Vaidya castes. By embracing colonial rule, they actively sought white-collar employment and land acquisition, thereby distancing themselves from the rural people of the region. By the late 19th century, this provincial elite, representing the interests of the non-cultivating rentier class, had begun to articulate its political stance through the formation of the Indian Association, a nationalist political organization that spearheaded the Swadeshi movement from 1905 to 1908. Although they were the originators of the idea of a Bengali nation, the Bhadraloks unfortunately distanced themselves from the lower castes and the Muslim population, who together comprised the majority of the province's inhabitants. As the nationalist movement gained momentum and expanded its base, the Bhadralok class grew increasingly detached, their absence from rural politics and conservative mindset became more pronounced. Despite their initial inclination towards nationalist politics, the Bhadralok's progressive estrangement from the peasantry and working class led them to increasingly embrace radical politics, resulting in the formation of clandestine organizations and the adoption of more extreme ideologies. Footnotes say here that having secured numerous land grants during the Sena period, 1136 to 1204 CE, Brahmins dominated the region since the 12th century. They also dominated Bengali society even during the Islamic period as scribal elites and powerful bureaucrats. During the British colonial period, they also occupied positions of power and privilege in the colonial administration and various other positions of influence. Even the revolutionary nationalists heavily drew on ascetic imagery and fashioned themselves as ascetics who would violently overthrow the colonial government. Their sources of inspiration ranged from warrior monks such as Naga sadhus, Goshais, and Ramnandis, who had a history of violent uprising. They thus trained their bodies and minds to endure hardships and deprivation to attain their goals of violent uprising. The 1930s witnessed a crackdown on Bengali Bhadralok nationalists, resulting in widespread imprisonment. This period of incarceration, however, also brought them into contact with Marxist and other revolutionary activists. The leisure time spent in jail by these individuals served to indoctrinate them into Marxist ideology, causing many to embrace it and subsequently redirect their authoritarian activism within a more complex Marxist framework, which ultimately led to the creation of numerous splinter parties. These groups spanned a wide range of violent political ideologies, encompassing what Broomfield called the spectrum of extremism. So we can call this video, if I upload this separately, which I will, let's say how the Bhadraloks became Marxist, basically. Or how Brahmins became Marxist. A key figure in the discussion is the prominent Bengali Brahmin Marxist M.N. Roy, born with the name Narendranath Bhattacharya, passed away in 1954, a founder of India's Communist Party. Following his involvement with nationalist revolutionary groups like Jugantar, he embraced Marxism after his escape from South Asia in 1915 and subsequent travels through Mexico. This person, by the way, as we learned from our podcast guest a few days back, Dr. Malay Patla, who has written a book on Veer Savarkar's connections with Bengal and Bengalis, he points out that M.N. Roy once met Veer Savarkar in Kolkata in fully Indian clothes. Excuse me. And his wife was, Veer Savarkar's wife was kind of surprised to see him in complete Indian attire and asked why all of a sudden these clothes. And he said that, yes, I might do other things in other places, but since Veer Savarkar was one of my earliest inspirations in this revolutionary path, therefore, as a mark of respect to him, I am coming to meet him in completely Indian clothes. His participation in the Indian nationalist struggle began only after he had formally allied himself with the Communist International, also known as the Comintern. This is where his dispute with Lenin arose concerning collaboration with nationalist leaders in the Second Comintern in 1920. While Lenin saw strategic value in allying with nationalists in South Asia to weaken European colonialism, M.N. Roy feared these nationalists would betray the revolutionary cause for more moderate bourgeois objectives. The Stalinist era witnessed a significant escalation in his dissenting opinions as the Comintern adopted a more hardline leftist position, while simultaneously M.N. Roy actively sought to integrate himself within the nationalist movement, drawn to its significantly broader support base. Finally, his disagreements with Moscow led to his expulsion from the Comintern by Stalinists in 1929. The decade of the 1930s witnessed a fragmentation of Indian nationalism, as the established Gandhian wing found itself at odds with a growing leftist opposition, notably the communists and the Royists, supporters of M.N. Roy, who represented a significant departure from the more traditional approaches to achieving independence. The footnote says, on October 17, 1920, a group of 7 people met in Tashkent, the capital of the then Turkestan Republic of the Soviet Union, to form the Communist Party of India, CPI. Their aim was to free India from British rule and to work towards the establishment of socialism in India. These intrepid revolutionaries were M.N. Roy, Evelyn Trent Roy, Abani Mukherjee, Rosa Fittingov, Muhammad Ali, Muhammad Shafiq, and M.P. B.T. Acharya. Evelyn was an American communist and wife of M.N. Roy, while Rosa Fittingov was a Russian communist married to Abani Mukherjee. Muhammad Shafiq was elected as secretary of the party, CPIM. Oh no, this is from a citation of CPIM 2019. However, it will be interesting to note here that Abani Mukherjee and M.N. Roy were Bengali Brahmins and MPBT Acharya was a Tamil Brahmin, demonstrating the pioneering role of Brahmins in the establishment of communism in South Asia. Despite their shared opposition to Gandhi's philosophy of non-violence, the various leftist factions found themselves at odds over the best strategy for national liberation, with some favoring a collective national effort and others championing a socialist revolution. Although the CPI continued to grow within the nationalist movement until the colonial government outlawed them in 1934, the Congress Socialist Party emerged that same year, with Royists forming its main leftist wing. Roy condemned CSP, Congress Socialist Party, for promoting socialism, arguing that nationalism should have been the priority. His opposition to both Gandhi and the CSP resulted in his ostracism from both organizations. Internal strife weakened leftist factions, allowing the Gandhian approach to prevail in the nationalist movement of the 1940s. The Tebhaga movement of the 1940s, with its demands for greater land reforms from landlords, revitalized the CPI-affiliated All India Kisan Sabha in Bengal, leading to electoral gains in West Bengal during the 1950s and 60s. The ideological split within the CPI in 1964 over whether to follow the Soviet or Chinese model ultimately led to the rise of the Communist Party of India Marxist, or CPIM, as a dominant communist party following the Chinese line. In the late 1960s, a faction of communist leaders based in West Bengal engaged in violent anti-state activities, culminating in the Naxalbari movement. Because they were disillusioned by the state of parliamentary politics, 2 Brahmin communists, Charu Majumdar and Kanu Shannal, spearheaded the Naxalbari movement. Subsequently, in 1969, Shannal established the Communist Party of India Marxist-Leninist, also known as the CPIML. A clear leftward shift had become the defining characteristic of West Bengal's political ideology, where the majority of the political spectrum, encompassing both moderate and radical groups, was dominated by leftist views. Following a period of intense internal strife and political upheaval marked by violent political actions in the late 1960s and early 1970s, also known as terrorism, the CPIM successfully guided the left front to a significant electoral victory in 1977, securing a considerable majority in the West Bengal Legislative Assembly and consequently assuming a position of power in the state government. Due to the successful implementation of land reforms, effective local governance, and a strong patronage model managed through a well-trained party organization, the left front maintained power for an unbroken 34 years, winning 7 consecutive elections until their defeat in the 2011 legislative elections. Charu Majumdar had contested parliamentary elections unsuccessfully prior to this as a candidate of the CPI and had lost miserably, and then decided that, okay, parliamentary elections suck. Rajarshi Dasgupta meticulously examines the ascetic lifestyle adopted by Bhadralok communists, revealing the details of the carefully constructed image they projected within Bengali society. Despite the Communist Party's emphasis on rejecting personal wealth for party loyalty and obedience, the austere lifestyles of communist leaders are primarily a form of self-promotion, a carefully constructed image designed to project authority and unwavering commitment. Their everyday communist activism focuses on self-discipline and sacrifice as pathways to communist ideals, thus mirroring the principles of asceticism. Their public condemnation, delivering through cautionary tales of fallen communist leaders, underscores the pattern of how asceticism preserves integrity. The stark narrative served as a potent reminder of the dangers of unchecked ambition and moral decay. Tracing the lineage of these ascetic leaders, Dasgupta highlights the influence of 19th and early 20th century Bhadralok individuals shaped by social reform movements like the Brahmo Samaj, which cultivated a deep commitment to moral causes aimed at improving society. During the 20th century, these values underwent a transformation to align with secular modernist ideals, leading to the embrace of the ascetic householder lifestyle among Bhadralok and Brahmin communists. Okay, the return to the ascetic householder lifestyle. Okay, this individual, although a member of society, aimed to rise above self-interest, acting as a moral and political compass for less privileged or less educated populations. Their public renunciation of material possessions and their embrace of physical hardship, reminiscent of ascetic practices, enables them to exert a unique and powerful control over the peasants, the working class, and other underprivileged members of society. Their displays of piety create the illusion of moral superiority, elevating them above the supposed baser desires of ordinary individuals. The Brahmo Samaj movement was an elitist movement in 19th century Calcutta. Despite its lasting effect on the cultural milieu of the Bhadralok and pioneering role in nationalist politics, it primarily drew its support base from upper caste and elite families in Calcutta and did not affect the lives of lower caste or Muslims in the region. The use of religious ascetic modalities by political leaders is a common practice, observed in groups ranging from those following Gandhian principles to the Hindu nationalist organization, the RSS. Exactly. However, the Bhadralok communists stands apart with its unique adoption of a secular, modernist, and abstinent ethos. It is unsurprising, therefore, that the 2011 West Bengal Legislative Assembly election was won by Mamata Banerjee, a Brahmin woman and Trinamool Congress leader whose distinctive political style is rooted in her ascetic lifestyle, leading to her ascension as chief minister. This study is one of reconciling contrary forces, those of ascetic and revolutionary impulses and domesticity. The establishment of monastic orders among both Christians and Buddhists, representing a structured lifestyle for monks, stemmed from the integration of ascetic individuals and groups into established state and institutional frameworks, thus exemplifying Max Weber's concept of the quote-unquote routinization of charisma, a process by which revolutionary figures or movements are gradually incorporated into the very systems they initially challenged, thereby becoming more akin to a bureaucratic order. Tambia has argued that Max Weber's understanding of charisma was significantly influenced by Christian ideas of personal revelation. The existence of bureaucratic structures within both Christian and Buddhist charismatic groups demonstrates the concept's broader applicability as a tool for examining the synthesis of opposing belief systems. Beautifully said. The fact that former nobles and aristocrats from positions of hereditary privilege dominated these monastic orders resulted in discriminatory treatment of the underprivileged and minority populations by them. This also serves as a validation for Rodney Stark's theories on asceticism, in which he illustrates that those belonging to the upper classes primarily made up the ascetic orders within Christianity and Buddhism, thus suggesting that it was not religion itself but the practice of asceticism that acted as the opium of the masses. My God, what a sentence. Oh my God, acknowledge, note the insane significance of this statement, guys. Rodney Stark is saying, religion is not the opium of the masses. Asceticism is the opium of the masses. Genius. Similarly, Brahmins integrated ascetic practices into their lifestyle and religious texts to consolidate their power. In the pre-modern era, Brahmin elites wielded considerable political power, adapting their religious ideology to suit the shifting socio-political landscape. To enhance their power, they selectively adopted Buddhist Sangha's values of asceticism and non-violence into their belief system. While Gandhi's non-violent movement had a mass appeal, unlike revolutionary politics, it also drew on traditional Hindu imagery of asceticism and made Gandhi a kind of saintly figure in Indian politics, known for his renunciation and toleration of hardship and strict adherence to principles of non-violence. Ironically, The figures of Hindu warrior monks also provided a model of emulation for Hindu nationalists as well. This is why the RSS also harps on a form of this, on a form of this, on a form of this worldly, on a form of this, which is the worldly asceticism in their lifestyles. Following a similar pattern, the Brahmins of Bengal, the region's most dominant caste, successfully integrated the burgeoning revolutionary ideologies of the nationalist and subsequently communist movements that were rapidly spreading across the world. In the synthesis of the ascetic householder figure, we see a reconciliation of seemingly contradictory forces: the utopian vision of communist revolution and the compelling pragmatic allure of maintaining power within the existing state structure. This was not merely a routine display of charisma. Rather, it's a strategic move to consolidate their grip on power and maintain their hereditary privileges. The unfortunate consequence of this development, however, was the transformation of West Bengal into one of India's most deeply casteist states, a transformation tragically exemplified by the horrific 1979 Morichapi genocide of Dalit refugees from Bangladesh, a massacre that was subsequently and systematically obscured by the government, the media, and the upper caste-dominated civil society. A unique brand of asceticism, practiced by the privileged Brahmin caste in Bengal, allowed for the acceptance and integration of revolutionary ideologies, most notably communism, into their social structure and personal lives. Their case presents a distinct counterexample to the routinization of charisma, where a highly privileged bureaucratic caste strategically co-opted revolutionary ideology to preserve their power and hereditary privileges. This was fun. Guys, I'm ending the live stream very quickly because I'm going to come online at 1 p.m., 1 a.m. right now, okay, in half an hour, and I'll have to make the thumbnail and announce it and stuff. It's going to be a Bengali live stream to discuss Rudonil Ghosh, the right-winger kind of actor who recently went on a big podcast, probably the biggest Bengali podcast. We'll listen to that and discuss, okay? So coming soon at 1, okay? Bye-bye. Good night.
যদি সবাই ফিরে যায় ওরে ওরে ও ভাগা সবাই ফিরে যায় যদি গহন পথে যাওয়ার কালে কেউ ফিরে না যায় তবে পথের কাটা তুই রক্ত মাখা চরণ তলে একলা দলরে তুই রক্ত মাখা চরণ তলে একলা দলরে যদি তোর ডাক শুনে কেউ না তবে একলা চলো রে যদি আলো না ধরে ওরে ওরে ও ভাগা আলো না ধরে যদি ঝড় বাদলে আধার রাতে দুয়ার দেয় ঘরে তবে বজ্রানলে আপন বুকের পাঁজর জ্বালিয়ে নিয়ে একলা চলো রে আপন বুকের পাঁজর জ্বালিয়ে নিয়ে একলা চলো রে যদি তোর ডাক শুনে কেউ না আসে তবে একলা চলো রে একলা চলো একলা চলো একলা চলো একলা চলো রে